So welcome everyone to another webinar, which we try to bring every month. And today's topic for the webinar is GitHub and Copilot, which is quite a buzz in the industry at this point of time with all the generative AI buzz and how this Copilot experience can help us. So we're going to do the quick webinar. But before we do that, a quick brief about the group and us. So today's webinar is brought to you by bigdatatrunk, a professional training services company started in 2008. We focus on soft skills and technology training, mostly online after pandemic, but still in person in certain scenarios for corporates largely, but we also do public trainings and individual trainings on several of the technology areas, but also we do soft skills, leadership, and several of those areas as well. So it's a good mix on both the sides. We do a lot of boot camps, which train people, and that's more targeted from corporate perspective. We do sometimes public, but mostly directed from the corporate side. Today's topic is related to generative AI, and we have series of different topics on that. We have several e-learning courses and things like that. So I'll share some free resources and all those things in the end. But generative AI, as all of us know, is quite a buzz in the industry and happening space. So from today's speaker perspective, we have Aparna from one of our lead instructors who is going to be driving the session. She's going to talk about mostly demos and concepts and things like that. You don't need to perform anything or exercises or anything some people have asked. So sit back, relax, and just watch the sessions. Hopefully this is going to be a very productive session with a very prominent topic in the industry. So I'm going to stop the share and let Aparna take over the share. So Aparna, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Raj. Welcome everybody to this session. Let's get started.
And we are monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, you can put in there. We will open up unmute options in the end. It's a large audience group which is continuously joining. So want to keep the experience smooth. So feel free to reach out to chat. We'll collect all those questions. Over to you, Aparna.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so once again, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to the session. We'll be talking very briefly about GitHub. Probably the focus would mostly be on Copilot, though for the most of the session, in fact. So this would be the agenda. A basic understanding of both Git and GitHub would be necessary before we move on to understanding how Copilot works. So that will be the primary focus, as in understanding the relationship or how both of those relate to one another and what are the advantages we get by making use of both Git and GitHub. And then we'll move on to understanding how we could integrate Copilot with one of our editors. We will be looking at a couple of use cases and also trying out some of those features direct through Copilot towards the very end. Also, like Raj has mentioned, any questions for now, please share them in the chat box, and we'll be taking them up towards the end as part of the Q&A session. Okay. Again, I'd just like to make this point clear that it does involve a lot of underlying concepts across 3 different topics. One would be Git, which is this version control system that probably, almost everyone who is into development does make very good use of, a locally installed version control system. And then we have the online platform that allows us to, in fact, collaborate, with local Git repositories, which would be GitHub. And more recently, although, in fact, the very first version has been released around 2021, we now have GitHub Copilot. Probably, think of it as ChatGPT for developers. So which in fact integrates with GitHub and any of your local code editors in order to help you out in terms of generating AI-based suggestions. So all of these kind of go hand in hand. And for anybody wanting to get started with GitHub Copilot, I'm assuming in all probability, you already have some good amount of experience with both Git and GitHub, but otherwise, those would be good places to get started before you can reap full benefits of GitHub Copilot. Very briefly about Git. like most of us are aware, this is an open source distributed version control system, probably the most famous and most commonly used one out there. It's a local installation, meaning you will have to download the code and then install it on your local system. So you could either use it, on a personal basis, wherein you use Git on your system in order to manage your own code repositories. Also, at a later point of time, you would be able to connect with other developers and then be able to share your work across people or teams. But initially, when we do get started, though, this happens on your local system, and hence it is extremely fast. Probably, the reason why a lot of people do go for Git is because of the extremely good version control and the very high levels of integrity that you get with Git. This kind of comes, from the way it actually manages code changes between one version and another. Let's say you've developed a version now, and then you would want to go on, make a certain changes. And every time you change or commit those changes to your local repositories, the way the actual versioning itself happens is done extremely well within Git, which is one of the reasons for its popularity and also, its high integrity as such. It also gives you very good support for doing all these other functionalities like creating branches, so that you will be able to try out maybe a new feature on one of the branches, see how that goes. And if you're satisfied with that, go ahead and then merge it back with your main master as such. This is how a typical Git workflow would look like. Again, I'm trying to just give you an overview of everything involved. To pretty much do all of these elements in detail would definitely require a complete long working session as such. But the idea of the session today is to give a complete overall perspective of how all of these things tie in with each other. Yeah. So now, wherever you have your working directory, which is where you probably go ahead and write your code, do your development, make changes. And the way Git works is you have to, after you have made, whatever changes that you think you're good to go with, you have to use the git add command and then move them into what is referred to as a staging area. Once that portion is done, that is when you are good to make those complete changes, as in, save the changes to your repository. And we would do this by making use of the git commit command. Again, Git requires a decent level of exposure, or I'd say, in fact, a good experience with making use of the command line Git-based tool. There are also other alternatives available to Git. You could get Git Bash for Windows. When we move on to GitHub, there is also GitHub Desktop that is available for people who prefer probably a more graphical user-based approach. So there are all these multiple alternatives available. But even to work with it in command mode, there are a few basic commands. And once we are very aware of how the workflow itself goes, getting started and then getting comfortable with Git is pretty straightforward. Like we mentioned, probably the best feature of Git is in terms of how it manages changes over time, which in turn helps it maintain very good integrity with respect to the code files. While most version control systems, in fact, make use of the delta based rules, as in what change has happened or the amount of change that has happened between one version and another, Git takes a very different approach in order to do this. So what it does is, over periods of time, whenever you're doing your commits, it kind of only makes a snapshot of whatever change has happened. So whatever are the elements that have changed in between your previous version to the current version, those are the ones which are saved in terms of some kind of codes that you actually notice quite a lot whenever you work either with Git or GitHub. And it is these snapshots over time that help you either to kind of go back to a previous version, or to ensure that all changes being done in between versions are stored permanently. So it's very easy for you to, or at least it's kind of safe in terms of not losing out anything that you have worked with through Git. Moving on to GitHub now. Again, whoever is into development with Git, in all probability, would also need to use GitHub on a regular basis. So GitHub, while Git is a software installation that you have on your local systems, GitHub is more of an online platform, which is extremely convenient for especially collaborative purposes. So one, you could use it to host your own repos. So all the work that you do on your local system, you could also move it to the cloud and then have it stored there on GitHub so that you can access it from multiple places. Although the main usage or functionality of GitHub would come in when multiple people can collaborate on software projects, from multiple locations, and be able to work with different parts of your code repos or different pieces of code at the same time. So this is extremely convenient for developers who are wanting to collaborate on projects, especially at a very huge scale. Again, the features that you get from Git in terms of being able to track, especially what changes have happened between this version and the previous one, whether or not you would want to accept those changes. So being able to manage those code changes is done extremely well through GitHub. One way that it allows you to do these changes and kind of track them over time is through this concept of pull requests. So for example, if there is an online code repo that I would want to work with, I can create a pull request. First, get a branch of that code, go ahead and make whatever necessary changes that I need to make, submit a pull request back to the main owner of the repo itself, who's then going to go ahead and try and understand if these changes are okay and if the changes are good to go, in which case my branch is going to be merged back to the master. So that would be how the whole process of keeping your original repo safe, making sure only valid kind of changes are being done, and then merging the changes back with the original actually happen. There is massive support for open source projects, especially, even for beginners, any new AI-based topic, in fact, even more specifically, anything data science related, AI related, if you'd want to pick up, you could just go to GitHub, sign up, and then search for, machine learning or deep learning, and massive amounts of open source code and projects are completely available. Very good place, in fact, to start learning. Almost, all the very recent LLM models that we keep hearing about, a lot of these deep learning algorithms that we'd want to test out, all of them are available for free out there. So on GitHub, makes extremely easy to get started on development. So along with the concept of public repos, we also have the options to create, your own private repositories. GitHub itself comes with a lot of security features in terms of checking through your code, access control, and making sure, both with respect to code change as well as allowing access to others. So there are quite a lot of good security features built into GitHub itself. And while Git is completely free, GitHub does give you a variety of paid plans as well, depending on the kind of features that you require. While GitHub is not the only online cloud-based platform in order to, do most of these tasks, there are some very good alternatives as well, like GitLab and Bitbucket. But then, for the purpose of making use of GitHub Copilot, obviously there's an extension that comes with GitHub. So you will need to have a GitHub account before you will be able to go ahead and get started with Copilot. Little detail in terms of the difference between Git and GitHub. Like we've mentioned, Git is a local installation. It's a software that you download and install on your system. GitHub is more of a cloud-based service for which you will have to sign up. Git works very well, in that command line mode, although you do have certain other alternatives if you're not very comfortable with that. But being good or aware of these, basic command line commands, in fact, that allow it or that make it easy for you to work with Git, makes development extremely fast. GitHub, on the other hand, comes with this very good graphical user interface, so you have all the commands or tabs, buttons, everything available there. So having a good understanding of the workflow or how things happen across GitHub, that should be sufficient to kind of get you started. Yeah. Git is maintained by Linux. GitHub is supported by Microsoft. In fact, GitHub Copilot at the backend is powered both by OpenAI as well as Microsoft. Main intent behind making use of Git is version control and code sharing. GitHub serves more as a central repository so that various different people across teams will be able to pull in code and then work on their own and then be able to merge it back with the original central source. So it helps you maintain that single source of truth. That is the idea behind using GitHub, whereas Git is mostly for your local development and to ensure that version control is being done well. Git is completely open source, completely free to use. GitHub for personal purposes is still free. There are certain business enterprise level paid plans as well. So in terms of how both of these kind of integrate or work with one another, you would have individual users making use of Git on their local systems in order to maintain their own repositories. And you could have like one single central repository hosted up there on GitHub, which all of these people can make use of. Go ahead and make their own individual changes, submit pull requests back, and then merge it back into the central repo. Biggest usage as such, or the biggest functionality from GitHub would be that it's collaborative in nature. So at the exact same time, various different developers could be working on different pieces of code on their own local repos, keep pushing their changes back to the online remote repository, and then whoever is tracking the repo, the centralized one, can definitely go ahead and see if those changes make sense and only then allow for a merge to happen. This would be a complete workflow of Git along with GitHub. Some part of it happens on a local basis. In terms of making use of GitHub itself, you could create your own clones, pull them down to your local system, go ahead and then work or make whatever changes that you need in your local repo version, and then push these changes back to the master. With GitHub, it is also possible, to create complete forks of a repository so that, especially where you do not have the intention of merging the changes back, but then you would want to kind of branch out and do very different kind of changes or then make changes for your own purposes. You could also go ahead and create forks instead of, making a local copy on your local system as such. Again, I'm aware that maybe, we're using in a lot of terminology, both in terms of Git and GitHub. But like we said, this is mostly like an introductory session to kind of give us an overview of, everything that happens with respect to all three of these components. Hence probably, the reason we are kind of speeding up with some of these aspects. All right. So this is going to be our focus area, in fact. What is Copilot? How does it work? What are the kind of advantages that we get by making use of Copilot? This is a image, from GitHub website, wherein, they claim that because of making use of Copilot, there is a 55% advantage or, efficiency jump for developers in terms of being able to do very fast coding over, almost 46 to 50% of the code that is being developed by whoever has Copilot extensions is now, all being written by Copilot itself. It is available across a variety of editors and makes the whole development process extremely quick and efficient. So let's try and understand, some of the features that we get through Copilot before we go ahead and see, exactly how it works. One, it is being branded as an AI pair programmer. So it's somebody that kind of pairs up with you and programs along with you, meaning, it's probably not meant to replace you as a developer, but then somebody who's just trying to assist you in the whole development process. And I guess, there's probably nobody now, who probably doesn't make use of ChatGPT. So very similar to that, even Copilot would give you either autocomplete style suggestions wherein, it is trying to kind of prompt as to how you could maybe, finish up some piece of code that you're writing, or probably what is a better way of doing that exact same job. Or you could ask it questions the way you would pose questions, or, write your prompts for ChatGPT, so that it will either write the code completely for you based on the prompt that you give. So you could either start coding and it understands and tries to assist you, or you could use the Copilot chat feature, wherein you could actually just give a question in natural language, give me a function to do so and so kind of a job. And also it would be able to generate that kind of code for you. How does, or how is Copilot, actually good at generating all this new code for you? Because it does analyze, once you have authorized it and you have the Copilot extension installed, based on whatever repo and that you're working on, all the files that make up that particular repository or that complete context are available to Copilot, which is it's going to analyze, and then it will be able to offer you what are the next best suggestions based on the code that you have developed to that extent. Similar to any of our, ChatGPT kind of models that we see out there, and it is, powered by a generative AI-based model. Currently, ChatGPT 4 is being used to power the latest versions of GitHub Copilot. So it is extremely accurate and very powerful in terms of the kind of code suggestions it gives, or in terms of, being able to understand the context with which you're working very well. Very similar to how most of these ChatGPT based models have been trained, because they have access to all this training data across the internet from various different regular languages. Similar to that, GitHub Copilot is also trained on, all sorts of programming languages that are available in massive quantities online across a lot of public repositories. This kind of, also has a bearing on the kind of suggestions or the kind of accurate codes that Copilot will be able to write for you. So if you are trying to develop in a language that probably doesn't have too many resources available online, maybe, its accuracy levels or the kind of suggestions might be limited in scope. But for any of the languages that are heavily used on the internet, JavaScript, Python, any of those, it is going to be able to do a wonderful job because it has been trained on huge amounts of data already. So like we said, the quality of suggestions you get is to a certain extent dependent on the training data that it has seen. Where you have, less representation online, maybe, the kind of suggestions might be slightly less quality, although they are definitely getting better over time. Copilot extensions, you will have to install based on whichever text editors that you have on your local system and that you're very comfortable working with. So, it's not like a one-off tool that you install, but whichever editor that you choose to work with, you will have to go ahead and get that specific installation for the editor of your choice. So again, how it works, kind of visualizing everything we've discussed. Excuse me.
Team, if anybody has any questions, you can park it in the chat. We're continuously monitoring that, and we'll take that in the end. So just a reminder. Yeah.
So at the back end, it is fueled by this OpenAI Codex models, which in turn have been trained by going through massive amounts of public code and repositories available online. And also, there is this constant interaction with your own context, whatever files or whatever repos that you're working with. So it is going to constantly monitor that. And accordingly, having gone through that context and all the previous training, it is able to provide you very good pertinent suggestions at that point of time. Also gives you the option of whether you would want to go ahead and accept those suggestions, or whether you would want to retry it, maybe, discard that and probably give you another approach of writing the exact same piece of code. So this back and forth kind of dialogue. Again, very similar to what we do with ChatGPT. So you could be doing the exact same thing with GitHub Copilot as well. So before you do get started, first, it is mandatory that you also have a GitHub account. Only then you would be able to go ahead and sign up for GitHub Copilot, which is one of the features that is available on the GitHub site itself. There are a variety of Copilot plans available at different price points as such, especially for students or teachers, or if you do have quite a few public repositories, the well-maintained, documented ones, you can request for a completely free account also. But barring those three sets of users, everybody else will need to go ahead with a paid plan. For those of you who are wanting to just try it out, it is possible to have a 30-day free trial. You will have to give in your credit card or your payment details, but you could cancel, within 30 days. So you could go ahead and try it out for free for a month. And once you do sign up for Copilot after having given your payment details, you will have to integrate it with any of your favorite IDs. In terms of the plans itself, the individual plan only costs close to $10 per month, sufficient for most of your personal development needs. You have access to Copilot chat so that you can also post questions in natural language. You could also request it to, especially if you want to check for plagiarism, you could ask it to block suggestions that match public code that is already available. That's an option that is possible. There are different kinds of suggestions that Copilot will be able to give you, even when you go for the least, the least priced individual plan itself. Business is mainly meant mostly for teams, slightly bigger teams. And then bigger organizations, in fact, can completely get it customized according to their own organization policies. So that would be the enterprise plans, wherein, it will be kind of customized according to their own needs. So when you get started, the first thing we will go ahead and do is installing the GitHub Copilot extension. After you do have, the Copilot extension itself, first you will need to go to one of your IDEs and then integrate Copilot into the IDE itself. So this is a screenshot that, kind of shows you how to do it with Visual Code, VS Code editor. So just going into Visual Studio Code, you will have the extensions option towards the left-hand side. Searching for GitHub Copilot will take you here, and then very quick job in terms of actually getting it installed. Once you have that, you will have to authorize GitHub so that, it will be able to access the VS Code. So that Copilot can now be used from within your editor. And when you do install your GitHub Copilot into any of your editors, there are two features that you get. One obviously is the GitHub Copilot itself, and an additional feature, which is Copilot chat. So this is if you would want to work with it more, from a NLP perspective, you're not really clear and you would want to actually type out your questions in English or any of the natural languages that it supports, that would be the Copilot chat. Copilot by itself is where, it tries to interact with you through code. Yeah, let's look at, some of the more basic use cases that we can get started with. The very first one is you just, even type out any comment in whichever language that you're coding, and it will be able to automatically generate the necessary suggestions for you. Let's go ahead and try that. I'm sharing my Visual Studio Code editor. Should be visible in a minute. And I'm going to go ahead with, very basic ones just to kind of showcase the functionality here. Now, for example, now you don't even have to, in fact, develop any code. You just go ahead and then type in a comment, and GitHub Copilot will actually start coming up with some sort of suggestions for you in order to go ahead and be able to, let's say, I would write to function to let me keep it. I'm right now doing this with C, and if you notice these yellow stars, I think they are a little small in size, but that is Copilot kind of trying to come up with automatic code suggestions for you. So just clicking on that, and then you say, do you want to generate code for this? Yeah, sort an array of marks. And it would automatically generate the code for you based on the language that you're using in order to develop this particular piece of code. So I had opened up a .c file, hence you're looking at all of these this entire code being generated in C. And here you notice that it does give you these options of whether you would want to accept the changes or discard the changes, or whether you would want to go ahead and maybe ask it to modify it slightly and make some more changes as well. So that would be the first, most simplest and straightforward use case, as in you just give it a comment, and based on the language that you're working with and the underlying context, especially if there is already certain code that is developed there, it will come up with the code all by itself, and you could either take it in completely as it is or discard it. The second way that somebody could actually go ahead and start making use of Copilot would be, especially places where there are repetitive patterns occurring, you could just put in a few pieces of code and it'll automatically come up with the remaining portions all by itself. So let's go ahead and try and look at how that works. Okay. Now, if you see, I have already just put in, maybe a couple of lines of code, creating some constants with a certain set of values here. And again, Copilot is kind of ready to give me suggestions based on whatever patterns it has probably understood. And, if you just ask it to repeat the pattern, it should come up with, the rest of the options by itself. So if you see, I've just given, these 3 lines here, and then the 4th line of code, which is days is equal to hours by 24. This is something that it is developed all by itself. And I just hit on enter, go to the next line. And then, it keeps giving me different other kind of suggestions that I can go ahead and pick up if I would want to probably, maybe show out those values on screen or something like that. So almost every single line of code that you keep typing up at that particular place in time, whatever happens to be the most suitable kind of a code suggestion, Copilot keeps going ahead and then giving you those options on a continual basis. Copilot is also extremely useful when you would want to, maybe either create tests or, be able to run some kind of tests on top of the code. Again, one thing to kind of keep in mind is it doesn't really test the kind of code it is generating, and that is left up to the programmer, or the burden is on the programmer to ensure that the code suggestions generated are actually correct. So with languages where, there is definitely a need for a lot of testing to be done, GitHub Copilot can help you in actually, taking up a lot of that kind of work. Now, for example, okay, let me just put in this prompt here. So I asked it, can you develop a test for this code? And then, let me just go ahead and say accept. Especially, with languages where you do need to write a lot of unit tests, GitHub Copilot can really quicken up that process. And where it is not possible, it'll come back and say, maybe, you will need to install these other functionalities or maybe any other kind of header files in order to be able to do that. So it also guides you with respect to the, if any of your components are missing. So that part of the job also, it gives you really good suggestions as to how to go ahead or move ahead with that. In fact, especially with respect to mobile development, if you're trying to come up with mobile apps, having Copilot kind of integrated with any of your mobile development frameworks, it is pretty straightforward to come up with complete apps in extremely small amounts of time. One thing to definitely note though is ChatGPT, can be used at various different levels of expertise by any kind of users. Copilot is more useful for developers who already have a certain amount of experience. If you're completely new to development and then just starting out, the kind of functionality that you get back is very basic. This kind of functionality you can probably get either from Google or from ChatGPT also to a certain extent. To be able to see really good benefit from Copilot, this is mainly meant for people who already have certain levels of expertise, at least, some basic amount of development experience to be able to make use of that. Also, if you're trying to kind of get started with coding in a brand new language that you have never really done before, Copilot is one very good place to get started where you're unfamiliar with languages or unfamiliar with frameworks. So using it in that NLP mode and then going ahead and just typing out, those comments I want to do. So, this entire code was just one single text prompt from me that I want to do EDA using Python. Nothing else was given. And this was the entire code that it generated all by itself, just based on that one single comment as such. Okay. So just typing out a comment and then hitting on GitHub Copilot, the option that kind of keeps coming up automatically after every line. It'll fill up the code for you, which you could either accept or discard. You could make use of it in order to autofill any code that is kind of following a pattern. It is very intuitive, in fact, in terms of coming up with the necessary options because it has been trained on similar patterns, massive amounts of those similar patterns. It can also suggest tests that are very good in order to complete or, in order to test out your complete code implementation. Again, very new areas that you're trying to start working with, completely unfamiliar frameworks. You could make use of Copilot chat in order to keep posting questions and, it can create code accordingly. You can also create complete applications by making use of Copilot, especially for mobile app development. It is very quick, fast, and probably, 1 or 2 days of practice with Copilot can actually help you in terms of developing complete code totally. This is one very brief video that is available on the GitHub website itself. So, you just type out your code, go to the chat and then say, write unit test for this function. And then, it is coming out with the complete test all by itself, which you could accept or, make use of. Certain aspects to be very mindful of though are one, how does GitHub Copilot actually, or how is it good at giving you or coming up with all of those kind of suggestions? There is a lot of user engagement data that is being collected on a regular basis. All the code that you write, in fact, your complete repositories, wherever you have your Copilot extension installed, these are available to Copilot. The entire set of prompts that you are giving into Copilot itself. The code suggestions once again become a part of the training database. Both the fact that you're accepting them or discarding them or asking it to modify or go ahead and make a change. All of this data is protected though, because you have to sign up to GitHub and then also sign up for Copilot, and you're only able to access it after you have signed in. So the data is definitely protected through very good encryption and access control. Probably, the most important point to keep in mind is the whole burden of ensuring whether it is right or not, and whether it is the right kind of code that is being written for that purpose in mind. It lies with the programmer. So you are responsible for ensuring the security and the quality of your code. Similar to how ChatGPT or Google Gemini, all of these give you that disclaimer that there are times where they could probably be giving you an inaccurate answer. Very similar to that, taking precautions when using code, it is kind of left up to you. It might come up with certain cases, especially slightly more complex cases. Maybe the code might not be correct. So from the programmer's end, a lot of rigorous testing, and especially searching for security vulnerabilities. This is something that you have to do by yourself before you can really reap the benefits of Copilot. It does have a lot of inbuilt features that do monitor and improve your code quality, but again, from your end also, a lot of extra work that needs to be done. On the whole, why would people even want to go for Copilot? One, it is a very good tool for code generation, especially the more straightforward, simpler use cases. It does a fabulous job at it. The more slightly complex use cases where you would want things like Copilot, as long as you can show it at least a little part of the code or come up with very good chat prompts, it will be able to generate good quality code for you. This, in fact, kind of streamlines your whole development process, makes it a lot more faster and efficient as well. Very good assistant as such, for developers who already have certain level of expertise with the whole development process itself, and also comfort with using both Git and GitHub. Helps you in writing very clean, efficient code. Also, you could use it like as a kind of a add-on tool just to generate a lot of documentation, generate, useful comments at various different parts of code. So you could also use it for that purpose as well. Okay. We'll kind of keep it open now for questions.
So thank you, Aparna. Thanks for the brief but very well covered the breadth of it, and thanks for showing the wonderful tool and the demo. It definitely brings in an exciting world to see a lot of comments, unit tests, and several things. I think there is a series of questions I have got, so I will go one by one on those. I actually tried to answer some of them already in the group, but before I do that, I just shared a few resources and just wanted to do that so that before anybody drops off, I think they get access to those. So we have a lot of free trainings, recordings, which are available. We keep doing this free webinars on a periodic basis. The first link is this serious meetups which we have. So feel free to browse through and connect so that you get access to the next upcoming meetup or whatever your focus area might be. As we said, we are a professional training services serving Fortune 500 companies, mostly focused on corporates, doing live instructor-led trainings for a lot of big corporates, as well as for individuals, whether it's e-learning, public training, upskilling, and several things as well. This recording and several of the past ones are uploaded on the YouTube channel, and we'll post this one as well soon. You can see other ones which have done in the past. The team has shared their 2 cents. We do a lot of public trainings. That's the chance where individuals can join in as well. So we have several of these which are live on certain dates defined. There is a Copilot one which is coming up also in some period of time next month. So if somebody is interested to take this journey forward, we'll get that. Along with this instructor live trainings, what we share or sometimes complement that with e-learning. So it's a good hybrid mix of e-learning as well as which you keep for lifetime. Plus you have the live instructor-led training. So you get the best of both worlds where you can clarify your doubts and things like that, but also have access to a resource which you can go back over and over again. So that's what we do. I also shared the link for the recordings from the past one, this link, and there's upcoming ones which we keep posting. So this is a good list for resources if you want to take tackle. So to that, I think I'm just going to go with the questions. The first one I think I already addressed. Is it available for students? So answer is yes, for free. It is as I pointed out in the link. It says verified students, teachers, and maintainers of popular open source, and I've shared the link for that. So that's available. I'm going to go one by one, so either you or I can answer, or Aparna, you can chime in. So people are thanking. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate for the kind words. The next question was around students, which I answered.
You go ahead with the next question, one aspect that I did want to mention, which I didn't, is if you're trying to use Copilot, for more work-related purposes, wherein, the kind of code that Copilot has access to is probably something that belongs to your organization. That is one aspect where people have to be extremely mindful about. A lot of companies do have very strict policies in terms of whether or not their code can be accessed by these kind of, public chat-based tools. So please do definitely go through your, internal security policies before you kind of expose your, especially, organization-based code to Copilot. A lot of big enterprises, in fact, have their own version of GitHub Copilot, through the enterprise plans customized for their needs. So that's fine. But at places where that doesn't exist, this is something that people have to be mindful about, or it can kind of, cause a little trouble down the line. So unless you have explicit permission to use it at work, probably, not a good idea to be using it for work-related purposes.
Right. And there is a related question, which I think you partially covered already, Aparna. Thank you for that. The question was, how do you make sure that the code is secure and free of security issues? You mentioned in certain degree, the burden is on the individual. Security, privacy, copyright, all of that comes into play. And not only Copilot, but generative AI as in general has to be handled with care. Several occasions, companies have burned their fingers by giving data or that was exposed and visible to outside public as well. So as Aparna already mentioned, that is a co-shared responsibility. The tools and systems may put some things, but I think that still a lot of that burden is on the individual. So it's use it as precautionary measures should be taken. The other question I have is are the comments expected in a specific format? Aparna, any thoughts on comments on that?
No,
I would suppose yes.
Okay. Yeah, depending on your programming language, whichever way, you generally go ahead and write the comments, that should be fine or enough for Copilot to be able to pick that up. Again, because it is powered by all these really powerful GPT-based models at the backend, even it doesn't have to be written in any one specific format. It is able to pick up, very similar to how ChatGPT would pick up your everyday questions and able to come up with the suitable code suggestions.
And reminding again, yes, we'll be sharing the recording. Thanks, Aparna, for the wonderful session. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you very much.